Hi, and welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to look at how you can move assets to other projects in Unreal Engine 5. Now, sometimes you have already built something and you want to use it in another project and you don't want to go about reinventing the wheel. And going into your desktop and finding the files and copying them over isn't a great way of doing it. Unreal has included a couple tools for you. We're covering the migration tool and creating a plugin. So at the end of this video, you'll understand the pros and cons of using each method. And I'm assuming you have a general knowledge of Unreal Engine, but nothing too in-depth. Okay, so for the first case, let's look at the migration tool. Now suppose you've got a project here and you really wanted to start off with that you've got in another project. Well, we have to create the project that you want to work in first, and then jump over to the project that has the material that you want to use. So let's look at a previous project here. I've got this set that I built for a previous tutorial for the podcast set. And if I look in here, I can find the level itself. So if I right click, go to Asset Actions, Migrate, it's now going to collect everything that's used in this level. So it's quite a few things, a lot of things associated to the mannequins, and this is every single item. Now, what is great about this is it's quite complete. On the downside, sometimes things get a little funny, especially if you're moving into a project that's in a different version of Unreal. You don't really want to be crossing versions because unpredictable things can happen. This is really the best option when you've got a lot of things to move and you can't be hunting around for each one. So I'll hit OK. It's gathering everything. I've got to tell it the folder of the project that I want it to go to. So in my case, we've got tutorial 3. Then you want to select your content folder and select. And now it's going to take a moment to migrate everything. Okay, with that done, let's jump over to the other project. And here we are in my tutorial 3 project. And now we can see there's a folder called podcast set. And inside here, we've got our level. And it looks like it's copied over all of the relevant files. We've got the fab folder here, which contains all the bits and pieces. And let's open up the level and see if it looks like the other one did. Of course, it needs a moment to sort all of the shaders. All right, something is labeled as bad there, which we'll have to take a closer look at. Let's just check this out now. What's this bad size? That's the player start. That's fine. I don't really need it, so I'll just delete that. So you can see this is a great method for moving over a whole bunch of assets. And this is also a great way of cleaning out your project, because after you've been working for a long time, you're probably going to have a whole bunch of assets that you don't need anymore. And there'll be versions of levels that you don't want, and your project has probably become quite bloated. So a good thing to do can be to create a new project and then go to the old one, grab just the level that you need, migrate it, and then it's only going to copy over the assets that are required for the level. So anything that you auditioned and then didn't end up using won't be copied, which means that your other project will be much smaller. One watch out for that is your settings won't come through. If you've got any plugins that you're expecting or adjustments in your editor preferences or project settings, those aren't going to come through. So you're going to have to make note of those and recreate them. Otherwise, a great way of slimming down a project, but not necessarily the right method, I think, when you've got some smaller items like blueprints that you want to have available quite often. So now let's look at creating plugins. Okay, so migrating is a great way of moving a whole bunch of assets from one project directly to another. But if you wanted to make sure that you had some assets that you could add very quickly from a discrete package, you can create a plugin. Now, I had always imagined that creating a plugin was a big hassle, a lot of work to it. It sounds imposing, but it's actually just a few clicks, and then you can put some items in there that are easily accessible to you. You can activate them in other projects. Again, backwards compatibility doesn't really work, but you should be able to move them to later versions of Unreal up to a point. But I suppose you could always resave it once you're in that version and move things slowly along. it's a great place to gather helpful tools for yourself, so you're not losing them amongst your different projects, because you can keep adding to it. So what we'll do now is we'll create a plugin with some assets from this project, grab something from a second project, and then bring it all into a third project. So first up, let's go to the plugins window, and I want to add a content-only plugin, and I'm going to call it Handy Items, and I'm the author. Create plugin, close, and then you're going to notice here you should have plugins, handy items, content. So this is the folder in which things that belong to this plugin should be. Then they will be grouped into that plugin and we can access them in another project. So if you can't see it, you need to go into settings. You can't see it on my screen right now, but show plugin content should be checked. And what I'd like to do is I created this blueprint, which is covered in another tutorial, and it is for flipping between different pages of a PDF which has been exported as separate PNG files. So you could have a screen that updates with the touch of a button to go to the next page or go to the previous. And it's a system that can accommodate as many pages as your individual application has. So first thing we want to do is we need to make sure that we gather up all of the items for this, because there is an input mapping context which has input actions associated with it. We've got a material instance here that's been applied to this plane, and we need to make sure that all of the items that we need are gathered up correctly. And since I don't want to go hunting and pecking for them, I'll hit Control B, which brings us to the blueprint itself, and then I'm going to go to Reference Viewer. Now these are all the items that are referenced. So what we're going to do now is select them all, hit Control B, which will select all of them in the content browser, and then drag over to the handy items content, copy here. Then I'm going to open this up. Now we've got a little bit of fixing to do, because this blueprint is not referencing this material instance, it's referencing the original material instance. This is just a copy of it. So I need to jump into the blueprint and rewire everything. So let's load that up. And I'll just go from the top to the bottom. So the mapping context that I want, this is the mapping context, and I want to have that. And in the static mesh, the material needs to be this material instance, and the parent material is not directly referenced actually, so I'm going to come and grab that. Just going to copy and paste that, and it hasn't come through, so I'll try with the drag. Now I need to make sure that this material instance is referencing that material. And let me just see quickly if I can find how to replace a parent. You know, I'm not going to muck about with that. I'm going to delete this material instance. That's fine. And now I'm going to create a material instance of this TV screen. Open it up. And the only change I had made was to have this reference PDF. I want to be sure that I'm referencing this copy of the PDF. Great. Copy, save, close that. Let's go back into our blueprint and ensure the static mesh is referencing this version of the material instance. And then in our event graph, let's ensure the textures are being called are the right ones. Is that it? I think that should be everything. If it isn't, when we open it up in the other project, we'll correct it and we'll repackage it and it'll be all fine. So that is the group of them. I'm going to save all, go back to the plugins page, and find our handy items and hit package. Now it's going to ask me where I want to save it. That's my folder, plugins. I've heard 2 noises, and that means that it's all done. So let's close this and go to the system. Now on my desktop, I've got a folder. There it is, handy items. And inside is the content that we expected to see. And let's go up to the plugin level, grab that folder. And now I'm going to go to the second project that I want to also grab items from, and that is this one. It doesn't have a plugins folder, so I'll just create a new one, making sure it's called plugins exactly like that. And I'll paste this in. And now if we open this project, we should see the plugin sitting there. Okay, and right off the bat, it has opened it up. And we can see it is right there. Let's drag our blueprint into the world. Okay, something's not right. Let's open it up. And there's a compiler error. Okay. Blueprint is bad. And let's see. Enhanced input action. Oh yeah. In the input mapping context, I forgot to replace the references to the previous and next button. So I will correct that now. So IA prev. And my previous button was referencing, was called by the letter T. And the next button by the letter Y. And there's a trigger that gets pressed. So I'm going to save this and close it. And now in our event graph, these next page and previous page references don't work. That's fine. IA next button, IA previous button. I'll just move these over by control clicking on the wire. All right, compile. Looking good. Save. Close that. And I can see my TV screen is here. And upside down now. That's fine. There we go. So if I wanted that screen to fit in this TV, what's it called? The screen frame. All right, so I can add this to be a child of the screen frame. Now I should be able to drag it onto my screen frame. Great. So if we go to the details and zero out the location, it should go to the right relative space. Strangely low. Okay, and let's make this 0 and minus 90. Okay, and the size needs to be slightly bigger, it looks like. Let's try 1.5. 1.6, 1.7, right, too big. And that's great that it is. All right, it looks almost to the right place. Let's just pull this forward ever so slightly. Oh, turn that off. Okay, so the screen is pretty much in the right place. Maybe just slightly too big. All right, now we've got the bevel of the TV cutting off the edges and slightly pillar boxed, but that's great. That's fine. Bring it down a bit more to the middle. And so now the blueprint is working. And if I hit play and if I hit Y, we see the page is changing, and go T, it's changing previously. So we've now brought in, through our plugin, the functionality of a blueprint. But of course, we've had to rework some of the references, which is only natural. So it just took a little moment to get it working correctly, but that's all fine. Now I'm going to create a new folder, call it TV screen, and I'll put all of these assets in there. and I want to bring over, now this is a seated version of the mannequin, and I'd like to have that also in my handy files, because if I don't have this mesh, then I'll need to import the third character asset pack and then spend some time bending the knees and the legs and all that to make it look like they're seated, and I'd rather just have the seated height right off the bat. So selecting this character, I'll hit Control B, and then I will check the reference viewer. That's it. There's no one further referenced. Perfect. So I'll now grab this guy and drag them to the handy items content folder, copy it there. There they are. I'll save this. Now I'm going to go to the plugin, Other, there we are, and I'm going to package it again. I'm going to replace the original one that I had because it's the new version that I want. And now let's drag this into the next project. So going back to my saved plugins folder on my desktop, if we go inside, we can see the seated characters there. SM seated is what it was called. So we'll come back out now, copy this, go to the third project we're talking about, tutorial 3. It doesn't have a plugins folder, so I will create a new plugins folder. Go in there, paste it, and come out here, open tutorial 3. Okay, and we can see we've got the SM seated character, which I can drag out into my world. And our TV screen should now be working perfectly because we have fixed the kinks, which is something we only have to do once. And it's upside down now for some reason. Oh, I rotated it the wrong way. There we go. So let's just do that 180. And if I hit play, and let's just, there they are. Let's find our guys. Dude is sitting, looking at the screen, and my Y and T buttons work. So now I've created for myself a helpful little plugin that I can import into any project I want at any time. And I know I'll have my little TV screen and my seated character, so I don't have to create a bunch of junk in my project that then has to ultimately get pulled out with some difficulty. So this is like my new favorite way of keeping track of good plugins. I'm going to go back to other projects that I've worked on where helpful blueprints have been created and put in a couple minutes to just reroute the references. And then I'll be able to bring them from project to project. So thanks Epic for putting this in and creating another way of migrating things around. And so then the last thing I wanted to mention was that if you're trying to move assets between projects, there's this asset downgrader in the Fab store, which if it does what it says on the tin, it's a way to downgrade assets from 5.4 to 5.3 to 5.2 and so forth, which can be a huge problem because even if you copy it into the content folder or you use the Migrate tool, it's not going to load up. It'll be sitting on your hard drive in the folder, but it's not going to show up in Unreal because it won't recognize it, because I think some elements are missing from the file itself, and this asset downgrader is going to inject them. So this is a great solution if you're trying to move things that way. You could always move your assets and then create a new version of the plugin that you have for 5.3 or 5.2 if you ever need to go back and forth, for example, and keep yourself in production that way. So thank you for listening today. I hope that this has been a helpful tutorial to you and you now understand a few different options for you when you want to move assets between projects. And now you know when one might be more helpful to you than another. And please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions for improvement for next time. Thank you very much for listening.